YouTube, what's going on? YC Imaging here with another video, and today I'm going to be letting you all know my top 5 tips to making better music videos. So without further ado, let's get into it. Tip number 1 is frame rate. When I start shooting music videos, I didn't personally know the significance and the importance of different frame rates, so I got a lot of my music videos wrong. When I say wrong, I mean frame rate wise. A lot of people don't know the correct or proper frame rates to use, so I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on which ones you should use when you're shooting your music videos. When shooting your music videos, your performances should either be in 24 or 30 frames per second. Me personally, I prefer 24. That's the standard cinematic frame rate that they use for films and documentaries and stuff like that. So 24 frames per second is the frame rate that you want to use for that, and the frame rate that you want to use for your slow-mo or B-roll shots is anything above 24 frames per second. 36 frames per second, 48, 60, 72, whatever you choose, it should be higher than 24 frames per second. The mistake I see new directors making is they'll shoot their performances and their B-roll in the same frame rate, and it just screws their music video up. I took it upon myself to film 2 shots, one at 24 frames per second and the other one at 72 frames per second. And with the 24 frames per second one, I attempted to slow it down in editing, as some directors tend to do, and you can see the difference between the 72 frames per second one and the 24 frames per second one, in which one looks better and smoother. If you own a Canon, when shooting 60 frames per second, you can see that the footage will come out to you at 60 frames per second. Not like the GH4. With the GH4, if you film over 24, then it will come out already conformed into that 24 frames per second frame rate. So what you want to do is, in post, whether you're on Final Cut, Premiere, you go in and you just conform your footage into that 24 frames per second from 60, and you'll have a lot smoother B-roll and slow motion shots. Tip number 2 is shutter speed. Shutter speed actually plays a big part as well in your footage and the actual feel that it gives off. As you can see in the 2 clips, one was filmed with the shutter speed cranked really high, and you can see it's a lot more edgy, and it's clear when moving it a lot. And then in the low one, which was shot in about 50 on the shutter, it's almost like when you're moving it a lot, you can't really see a lot. So just take that into key if you're filming and you want to give off an edgy feel. Make sure your shutter speed is cranked high, so you give off that actual feel. If it's low, then the footage will look almost out of focus. It'll just be milky and it'll just be all over the place. Tip number 3 is picture profile. I see a lot of directors filming in the standard picture profile, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I used to do it when I started, but if you shoot in a flatter profile, it'll give you more room to edit in post. You can see from the clips here, one was shot in standard and the other was shot in the Cinelite D profile for the GH4. The flatter image is a lot more easier to grade in post, but it'll give you a lot more room when grading in post to really do what you want to do. You can see in the standard one that those darks and those darks are really crushed, and those highlights they're very high already. So the contrast is already in there, and it won't give you that much room in editing in post. If you're filming on Canon, which a lot of you directors are, I'll leave a link in the description for you to check out Technicolor Cinestyle, and that's what I use when I own Canon. And it's a great flat picture profile, and it'll give you a lot more room in post for those colors. Tip number 4 is focal length and aperture. These two actually make a big difference in your footage, as well as all these tips do. So if I say it again, just know the importance of it. Let's tackle focal length first. So with the 2 clips you see here, one was shot at 18 millimeters and the other was shot at 35. They're around the same distance from the object view-wise when you see them in the footage, but the 35 one tends to look a lot more cinematic, just because if you zoom in on an object as opposed to getting that close with a wide lens, it just gives off a much more cinematic feel. The focal length that's higher will give you a more cinematic look than the focal length that's lower. Just take that into consideration when you're shooting. Aperture. When shooting with the low aperture, you'll get a lot more depth of field in your shot. As you can see, these 2 ones right here, one was shot at f8.0 and one was shot at 1.6. And you can just see the depth of field between the 2 shots and the one that's shot in the lower aperture. If you're looking to make those, creamy backgrounds and blurred out backgrounds to really focus in on your subject, make sure you use a low aperture. Focal length will also help you with that as well if you don't have a lens that has that low of an aperture. It'll always help to zoom in on the subject before shooting, as opposed to getting close to it with a wide lens. And that will give you a more cinematic feel, or more depth with your shot. Tip number 5 has absolutely nothing to do with cameras or equipment or editing or anything like that. Tip number 5 is taking over. And what I mean with that is when you're directing and you're on a set, make sure you take over that set, man. It's very important. When I was starting out, most of the time when I came to the shoot, I would let the artists, take over and, do what they wanted to do with it. And I found myself very unsatisfied with my videos. So when you're on set, if you see something you don't like from an artist, you don't like the way they're performing, you don't like the location that they came up with, you don't like the plot they came up with, say something, you know what I mean? It's your work as well, it's not just theirs. Make sure you give off your vision for your project when you're on set. If you see something you don't like, you don't have to be a dick about it or anything like that, but you can be like, hey, I think you should do it this way, I think this will look better. And most of the time artists will give in. They know you're the director, they know what looks best. And every now and then you'll run into those artists who they won't give in. And with those artists, man, it's up to you to either sit through the shoot and just give them what they want, or to just not shoot with them anymore. That's on you. But make sure when you're on set you get the best possible shots for your video, man, because that's your work as well. All right, man, I'm gonna close out this video here. If you all liked it, you found insightful information, make sure you leave a like, comment, also subscribe, and I'm gonna check you out in my next video, which won't be tomorrow but the day after that. Peace.